The Hungarians have done some interesting stuff. The Hungarians have said, you get a loan. If you're a couple that marries before the age of 30, you get a large loan. For every child you have, 25% of the loan is written off. So if you have 4 children, the loan is completely written off. Now, they're spending about 5% of GDP on this. Very expensive. But if you eliminated stupid and costly climate commitments, lots of foreign aid to countries who hate us, and the money we spend on battery farming foreign nationals in social housing and asylum accommodation, we might be able to make it, and it would be a much more sound investment. They've also said to women, if you have children, for each child you have, 25% of income tax will be knocked off for life. So that means that by the time that you have raised your kids and grown up, if you're running a little business on the side, or you decide to go work full time, you're never going to pay income tax again. So you get a second lease on life the moment that your kids have left to go to university and had children of their own. It has upticked the birth rate very slightly, because pretty much everywhere in the world is now sub-replacement birth rate, other than some countries in Africa.
I feel like I saw somewhere that it upticked by 0.1%.
It was about 0.2, but the encouraging metrics for the long term is that divorces have halved, abortions have more than halved, marriages have more than doubled. And that was during lockdown, where every single other country in Europe, all of those metrics were flatlining and decreasing. So that's encouraging. But on the cultural point being just as important as the economic point, I also would like to rule out daycare, by the way, because daycare is a terrible thing for kids. Raises their average blood cortisol level throughout their life, makes them more likely to have mental health issues. And you're not going to encourage people who want kids to have more kids by saying, here, at an earlier age, you can get paid to stick them in government daycare and you can go back to work making widgets and contributing to GDP. Point being, the Israelis don't have to do the same measures that the Hungarians do, but they have higher GDP per capita, so they're not suffering these economic problems. They've got thriving religious culture. They've got a thriving sort of sense of national identity, and they've got a high birth rate. They're about the only modern developed country that have a above replacement birth rate, and it's trending up because there are certain Orthodox sects who have like 8 kids on average, but even secular Jews there who don't believe in the tenets of Judaism, they live there, and because having children is just normal to them, it's sort of high status thing, they end up having more than the replacement level, which is 2.1 children per woman as well. So there's something about the cultural default being having kids is a good thing, it's the default standard, and if you're a young person, having other young people having kids around you that makes it normal. So having your first is not as big a leap. There's something about that that primes people for it, no matter how much money you want to put at them.
Should we really be looking at the lessening divorces happening because of these incentives? Surely maybe someone would push back on you and say that they've just lessened because there are incentives for people not to do that, when actually, truly, if it was more convenient and accessible, they would take that divorce and it would be the right option for them. Would it not be more productive to look at the things like the initiation of having kids, which has barely upticked?
It's going to take some time, just because people, when they get married, lots of them want to be situated. There's still housing problems that they haven't overcome. Housing problems are also a lot worse here. That's something else we can get into. But I'd also say about divorce, there seems to be an intractable problem with how we talk about divorce. We haven't had no-fault divorce in this country for very long. I think that was only introduced under the Conservatives. Most people think about divorce in the American context, which has had no-fault divorce for a very long time. The problem with divorce is that it is always framed in a way that leads to, again, what's good for the individual. It's, we have irreconcilable differences, I married the wrong partner, it's not working out, I'm going to leave. Katie Faust is very good on this. She runs a charity called Them Before Us, and it's a child-centric worldview. And she always says, who is the person who has the least say in a household that's breaking down? It's the child. They didn't choose their parents. So what a child has to do is suffer on behalf of what the parents want as atomized individuals because they made the wrong choices. Instead, if you're a parent, you should be thinking, because this kid didn't choose me, I should act as if they could have chosen me, they would have. So that means I have to live up to the bar of, they would choose me above all other parents if they could. Therefore, I should act in such a way that keeps my family together, and I should choose a partner that is proper enough that I would want to stay with them. And so, yes, financial incentives, can help encourage marriages, etc. But you need a robust enough culture that cultivates people of moral virtue so that when they come together, they don't immediately think, right, there's no consequences for just tearing this bond asunder. It matters no more than just an economic transaction because it's good for the tax rates, right? This is what I think the Israelis do quite well, even though I'm not Jewish. And also the Hungarians with, let's say, their rising levels of Christianity after the Soviet Union. This is what they're getting a recognizance of. A good cultural example actually Georgia. I think if you have over 3 children in Georgia, the country, not the American state, the archbishop himself will come and baptize your baby. Because Christianity is still very prevalent there, that makes it a high status thing. So you need to lean into the sort of cultural high statusness to incentivize marriage between good people, discourage divorce, encourage having kids, ensure that the culture is passed on generations.
It is terrifying looking at this depopulation bomb that's going off. And the weirdest part is seeing this rise in online antinatalists who are saying that we're overpopulated and that it's evil to have kids. What do you make to that movement?
So I think it's fundamentally inhuman because if you look at most of the polling, the majority of young men and young women say that they want more than 2 kids. I think it was the New Social Covenant Foundation that found late last year that 92% of women 18 to 30 in the UK said they wanted 2 to 3 children.
Well, people don't want to have less kids. It's just less people are having kids as a whole.
Yes, quite. And we've now reached 50% of women age 30 in the UK who have not had children, which by my friend demographer Stephen Shaw's calculations mean that 50% of that 50% will never have children because they might not meet the right person in time. So they're going to succumb to something he calls unplanned childlessness. So about 25% of our total generation is never going to have kids, even though they wanted them. It's only about 10% of people that don't want kids ever. And those people, again, lots of it is fed to them by social media algorithms. They've fallen for the lie that human beings are unconscionable consumers of nature and the climate, and it should be left as a sacrifice to the sun god or something. Or there are people that say human beings don't consent to be born, therefore it's evil to inflict upon them something they didn't consent to. It's ultimate brain rot of liberal morality, clearly. But I think it's actually a less conscious thing than that. I think for the people that think they're choosing not to have kids, the unspoken truth is, again, if you have a broken family, you can't justify family. And I think a lot of people that don't want to have those kids have come from very broken and traumatizing homes, so they can't see the value in becoming parents themselves because their lives as children was so poor. And so I don't think, unless you're willing to address the multifaceted forms of child abuse in civilization, you're going to convince those people rationally.